The next call is a split call. The Honourable Damon O'Connor, 5 minutes.
Mr Speaker, thank you. It is important to acknowledge why this bill is in this House. And it was the loss of 29 men at Pike River that brought about this bill. But, Mr Speaker, we need this legislation for more than that. We need health and safety legislation to protect us from ourselves. Mr Speaker, whether you work at the coalface or on the cowshed or on the chain, or you're sitting in the office or in the boardroom, Mr Speaker, we're all Kiwis trying to get on with our lives. And that Kiwi culture mentioned by the previous speaker is one of innovation, Mr Speaker. It's a hard-working culture, a number 8 wire can-do that ends up being a must-do attitude. And the must-do attitude comes from the top and the bottom, and that's the attitude we must protect ourselves from. Mr Speaker, I've worked on the chainsaws in the bush. Mr Speaker, I've worked with animals in open yards, and I've been on motorbikes without much care, Mr Speaker, and I'm lucky to be alive. I'm lucky to be here, but Parliament cannot depend upon luck to protect workers in this country, Mr Speaker. We can't depend upon human nature and Kiwi culture. We can't depend upon common sense, because it's not that common. Mr Speaker, a previous National Party speaker said we need leadership, we need commitment. What he didn't say is we need good law, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, National voted down my legislation, and this is their excuse to why they did so, because they had this bill coming. Mr Speaker, the rhetoric that we've heard in this House today would have been heard in 1992 when the mining industry was deregulated, Mr Speaker, when the occupational safety and health regime was put in place to share responsibility for health and safety in the workplace. But you know who paid the price, Mr Speaker? It was only the workers. Hundreds and hundreds of workers paying the price for a regime where responsibility was shared by everyone. Mr Speaker, Bill Brazel in 1994 warned me what would happen in mining. Mr Speaker, I warned officials, I warned ministers, Mr Speaker, but we did not make the changes that were needed to protect workers in the workplace, Mr Speaker, and 29 men lost their lives at Pike River. And hundreds of other Kiwis have lost their lives as well, Mr Speaker. They have paid the ultimate price. What we need here is good law, Mr Speaker, to protect us from ourselves. But this law, Mr Speaker, is convenient. It's compromised. It might be comfortable. It might be balanced, as Mr Williamson says, Mr Speaker. But what we need is good, effective law. Law that protects workers in the workplace, Mr Speaker. There was a huge amount of work done by the Royal Commission and by officials in this country, Mr Speaker. I acknowledge that work. And a bill was brought to this House, and Labor supported that bill into. It wasn't perfect, but we supported it into Select Committee. I wasn't a member of the committee, and I trust the wisdom of my colleagues to give me the advice, Mr Speaker. But now, Mr Speaker, it's a bill that has been compromised. Firstly, by political posturing by some National Party MPs, then by political pressure from some of the funders of the National Party to dumb it down, Mr Speaker, and now it's political pragmatism that's delivered a bill that we believe doesn't provide the protection that is necessary, Mr Speaker. This bill dishonours the promises made to the families of the Pike River families, Mr Speaker. The first promise that everything that would be done, that could be done, would be done to bring the bodies out. That was a broken promise. The second one was that the huge price paid by those men and those families would result in real change, would result in real progress, and would result in real protection for New Zealand workers. Mr Speaker, we don't think that that bill does this. That's why we can't support it. Mr Speaker, we say it every year. We say it on Anzac Day, lest we forget. Mr Speaker, we have had hundreds and hundreds of New Zealanders killed because of compromised legislation, because of convenient legislation. Mr Speaker, it's time we put in place effective legislation and honoured those
Order.
Pike River men
The
and their
member's
families.
time has expired.